good morning and good afternoon, wherever this webinar finds you in the world, and welcome to another edition of CIONET Spotlight, where, as you know, each week we put a digital leader somewhere in the world in the spotlight. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Francisco Fraga, who's the Group CIO of Campbell Soup, and certainly we've all seen the red and white labels. It's an icon around the world. But it's a food group that's a lot larger than Campbell Soup, and they have many other brands within the family. So Campbell's is just the group name representing a lot of food brands. About $9 billion in revenue this current year, about 20,000 employees globally. So it's a very large multi-billion-dollar company. Francisco grew up in Venezuela and started with Procter & Gamble and has had a very long 2-decade career in technology, and he relocated from Venezuela to the United States, and he's had successive responsibility primarily in Procter & Gamble, and then more laterally has moved over in the last half decade over to Campbell Soup. As you know, all of my introductions always leave out all the interesting good stuff. So without further ado, I'll introduce Francisco. Welcome. Thanks for being on today.
Thank you, Mark. Delighted to be here.
And maybe you could fill in a few of those blanks, because as I said, I just framed your career, but all the interesting stuff, of course, you can help us with. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more on the P&G experience, kind of how you came through the technology ranks, and then how you transitioned over to Campbell's.
Sure. Yeah. Look, I mean, 25 years now of CPG IT experience, which seems like a long time, but has gone really, really quickly, and has been just a fantastic journey. As you said, I started with Procter & Gamble in Venezuela at a time where P&G had just decided to move to a SAP ERP solution by replacing all of our local, typically in many cases, ingrown ERP solutions all over the world, and Venezuela was chosen as one of the global pilots. So I joke that I was in the right place at the right time. And that was really what I did for the first 5 years of my career, was implementing SAP in Latin America. So I had the privilege to do the implementation in Venezuela, and then relocated to Argentina and Brazil and Puerto Rico and Mexico. So a lot of travel in the first 5 years of my career, and then came to the US in Cincinnati, Ohio, and went through multiple assignments across corporate roles in IT, what used to be called market development organizations for regions, and business units around fabric care, home care, and most recently feminine care. My last role there was a global chief technology officer for P&G, and I was also the CIO for the feminine care division.
That's great. And then your transition to Campbell Soup from P&G?
Yeah, you know, after almost 22 years at P&G, the opportunity of becoming Campbell's Chief Information and Technology Officer came along, and it was just a tremendous opportunity at the right time, joining a company that I have respected for so long, that recognized the value of technology, and that was really looking for somebody to come and help bring the IT organization to the levels that we needed to remain competitive and enable the company's objectives. So it has been now over 3 years, a fantastic experience, and really a very enriching professional and personal change. That's
great. And as our regular viewers know, we like to look back a year, and then we like to look forward a year, and the next 25 or so minutes will go pretty quick, but let's start by looking back. It's obviously an amazing year with COVID globally, but let's quickly say, what did you have in place? What processes, what things were in place that allowed you to have the kind of continuity that you wanted to have as an IT organization? Were there things that were helpful that were already there that allowed you to continue to thrive as an IT organization during the past year?
Yeah, look, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is the migration to the cloud that we had completed by the time the pandemic started. So one of the things that we set for our strategies that we were going to embrace public cloud, and we had migrated about 90% or so of our workloads to the public cloud, including our ERP system, our business intelligence stack. And that gave us tremendous flexibility to scale as we experienced an unprecedented amount of demand for our products when the pandemic started, the lockdown started, and the consumer demand just went extremely high. That served us really, really well because we were able to scale up in all the right places on a very timely basis. The other thing is the transition that we have been doing to virtual collaboration. I mean, one of our legs of our digital strategy is the empowerment of the employee. And virtual collaboration has been a key enabler for that. So we had been down that journey for a while, had just started the transition to Teams and Microsoft Teams, that is. And the business process transformation that we had done by helping our employees to work effectively across multiple locations became absolutely critical when we find ourselves working from home and have been doing so for the last 12 months.
That's great. Now, we often think of virtual work and online work using Teams, Zoom, whatever, Cisco, whatever else you use. But that works for knowledge work. But you run manufacturing lines, right? I don't know how many manufacturing lines around the world you run, but I suspect it's substantive. How does virtual, how did you support the continuity of those manufacturing lines when your people were remote, when I assume staffing levels and how that was done safely changes? Can you talk about what the plan was for IT support manufacturing in a time when those manufacturing lines weren't normal, I suspect? Yeah,
look, I mean, they were operating throughout, and the health and the well-being of those frontline workers that were basically making the food that you and I were enjoying while this was all happening became absolutely priority number one. So the investment in making sure that our factory employees were safe and that we were maximizing their well-being was absolutely critical for all of us. Digital technology played in a couple of roles. One is ensuring communication to them, making sure that we were able to reach out to them wherever they were on a timely basis. As you can imagine, the traditional means of engaging our teams were no longer available, right? You could not do a town hall in a room at a manufacturing site while keeping social distancing in place. And we also have to be able to ensure that as people were coming to the site, we were able to measure their temperatures, ensure that they answer a few critical questions to confirm that they have stayed safe, and then make sure that everybody was healthy as they were coming into the operations. And IT played a role enabling all of those. Right. And what other lessons? So you had a continuity plan. Sounds like it worked. Yes. What kind of modifications would you do to it in the spirit of making it more robust next time you need to pull out and use it? I know that's a continuing process, but are there things that you would shore up or include or enhance in the next rev of the continuity plan? Yeah, when I think about our continuity plans, I think that they really, really served us extremely well. If you ask me, looking back a year, what I would have done differently, I probably would have done some of the changes that we implemented even faster. I'll give you an example. One of our most successful offerings within the context of digital workplace services is our tech lounges. So we have multiple offices, and we have spaces, physical spaces, where our colleagues can come in and get help with any technical challenges they may be facing, or get real time education on the solutions that we have deployed. And as our knowledge workers shifted to a remote environment, working from home, those tech lounges were not really providing any service. And with the uncertainty of when we were going to return back to the office, as you can imagine, back March, April, it was not very clear how long this was going to last. I think it took us a bit longer to shift those tech lounges to what they are today, which is virtual tech lounges, which I wish we would have done much faster, because they have not only become a fantastic alternative to the physical space, they are actually even more positively rated than ever before. So speed of a reaction, it's something that I would definitely do much more going forward.
You got it. Speaking of going forward, let's shift gears and let's look out. 21, 22, even 23, you wear two hats. You wear the CTO hat and you wear the CIO hat. I think of the CTO hat in some ways as being more being able to look out longer and not necessarily more strategic, but having a different time horizon on the bigger technology choices that you need to make. And I think of CIO role as more operationalizing that and putting the systems and processes and people trained to deliver. And so wearing your CTO hat, let's just look at the industry. Let's look at CPG. What are the big things that CIOs in CPG need to think about in the out years, in 2022, 23, 24? Where are going to be the big swings that CPG CIOs globally need to think about?
Look, I think, and not only CPG, I think in general, one thing that we have seen is that our ability to respond quickly to unanticipated business opportunities and challenges, it's been critical and will continue to be so going forward. So I think making sure that your technology stack, as well as your people and processes, enable you to respond quickly, it's going to be absolutely critical, has been and will continue to be. I mean, I'll give you another example, right? As the pandemic started, we saw an unprecedented amount of demand for our products. Consumers, as they were dealing with the uncertainty of the pandemic, lockdowns were starting, the consumption numbers just went very, very, very high. So we found ourselves not really having any historical data sets that we could leverage to try to forecast what the future demand was going to be. And our ability to respond quickly with new analytical models, with new data, and ultimately being able to put all of that together with new solutions that helped our business partners determine what to manufacture where, and to make sure that we could satisfy consumers' demand, require a tremendous amount of speed and flexibility. And that, I believe, has been critical and will continue to be critical in CPG and across industries.
Francisco, if I hear you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if I hear you, when I hear responsive IT, I think of cloud, which you've already mentioned. I think of microservices. I think of APIs, containerization. I think of these ways of keeping a very nimble IT architecture. Is that, and then on top of that is, people and process. But is that at its core? Is that just a way of working that you think of everything has to be very nimble like that at the architecture level? Is that what I'm hearing, or is there more to it than that?
That's exactly right. I mean, it's very much what you mentioned. It's embracing the cloud, the public cloud, so that you can gain the elasticity at the infrastructure level. Is making sure that you have an API based architecture so that you can ingest data streams and on a needed basis, some of which may be completely brand new, like the number of COVID cases on any given region, or behavioral patterns as some states here in the US start to reopen, and you start to see some changes in what people can or cannot do outside their homes. And then embracing automation, making sure that everything that we can automate, that an algorithm can do, it's explore, analyzed, and if possible, automated. I think all of that creates a level of agility and elasticity that is going to be critical going forward.
Take CPG, the value chain of CPG.
Yeah.
I assume there's about 5 or 6 basic steps in the value chain. There's R&D, there's material sourcing, there's production, there's distribution, sales management, and forecasting. That's roughly the business, I guess. Then you look at technology, and we know that the rate of technological change appears to be increasing. You got AI, and you got big data, and you got robotics and automation and RPA and all that stuff, and you got all these. How do you, as a technologist and digital leader, how do you map those steps in the value chain in your industry against all these technologies? Is that the way to frame it, or do you frame it a different way? But how do you think about what's happening in 5 years and how you bring that into the business to add value?
Yeah, look, it starts with a clear understanding of the business. So I really start with the business objectives. Where is the business headed? And ultimately, what those objectives are going to require from a business point of view versus what we do today and how we operate today and what we need to operate like in the future. And that is always my starting point. And then we translate that into a technology roadmap. So with clarity on where the business is headed and the needs that we are going to have to support, then we can very clearly articulate, okay, what is the technology that we are going to have to have? What type of applications are we going to have to run? What type of data are we going to need to support the new decisions that our business is gonna have to make? And that's really how I sequence it. Now, certainly there are technology innovations that you look at, and you have a little bit of the opposite view, and you say, okay, this actually is quite interesting. How can I leverage these to address an opportunity that we have not been able to address earlier, or even explore a business advantage for Campbell? So it's definitely a two-way street, but my bias is always to start by really understanding the business, the processes, and how those need to change over time.
Sure. And I certainly agree that those business challenges drive the technology decisions, but to unpack that and I'm asking this as a generic CPG question, in fact, a generic IT question that could be applied across any industries. are there certain areas that you think are really the important things to get right, the right technologies that really, beyond the buzzwords, really ought to focus digital leaders' attention right now? So, for instance, is AI overrated or underrated? Is RPA overrated or underrated? I'm just trying to get a flavor. And again, I'm not asking for a company specific direction unless it's previously been published or discussed. So I'm not asking for anything outside of your IT strategy that you'd like to keep secret. But in CPG in general, when you think of the manufacturing lines, is RPA critically important, or no, it's just something by another name? We've been doing automation in the industry for 40 years. Just trying to get a little insight for CPG executives, which many are in our community, what you think are the hot topics in general.
Yeah, look, data and analytics has been and will continue to be a critical area of investment for us. Making sure that we are able to digest data volumes like never before, and being able to translate those into insights that our business partners can leverage and to make better and faster decisions. It's definitely going to be at the center of what we are doing. You mentioned automation and the different technologies that we are leveraging there. In some cases, one of my favorite laws in our IT world is the one that says that we tend to overestimate the impact of technology in the short term, and we typically underestimate it in the long term. And I think in the case of automation, that's very true. RPA is real. Robotic process automation has been serving us well now for many years. It's definitely a fairly effective way to drive productivity and help our employees to gain time so that they can focus in areas where they are better suited. Artificial intelligence, it's one that we are leveraging mostly within the context of our decision support space, as we really take advantage of largest amount of historical information to identify and predict what it's going to happen. And look, I'll be remiss of not mentioning some of the foundational ones that ultimately are critical for us to be able to talk about the ones we just talked about, which is making sure that in the world of CPG, you are flawlessly working on an always-on type of operation. I mean, our factories operate 24/7, almost 365 days a year. So the fundamentals, although may not be as sexy as some of the ones that we have talked, are absolutely as critical, and in my mind, just as important. So making sure that we are running an operations that is always on and is cyber secure, so that we protect our data and make sure that there is no unplanned downtime that may impact our operations. It's been and will continue to be critical.
Just touching on data quickly, you mentioned the importance of data and analytics. You started with that, and it's come up earlier in the discussion. Do you have a chief data officer? And how is that structured? Is he or she reporting through to you, or considered a peer of you, or just a little more insight on how you think about, given data is so important, how you think about it organizationally? Because I know that's a topic that depends on the organization. They structure it differently. I'm just curious how you do it at Campbell.
Yeah, we have a very formal data and analytics program, and we have a chief data officer that reports to me. She's really driving the data strategy for the company, but with the goal of really making sure that we bring data literacy across all corners of Campbell. We truly believe that ultimately developing the organization's analytical skills and making sure that people understand the value of data and leverage it to inform the decisions they are making it's going to be critical. So our team really makes sure that we have the right data assets, that we have the right capabilities to exploit those data assets, and that we have the right data governance practices so that those assets are well managed, and making sure that we have the technology that allows us to extract value from those assets. But ultimately, it's at the service of our business partners, which is where the decisions are made, and ensuring that they have these data at their fingertips as they are gathering insights to make decisions. And as we inform, right, through the right analytical models, and give them advice on business situations or circumstances that may be important for them to take into account as they are managing the day-to-day.
That's great. And it sounds like you're really embedding that in the business partners, in the organizations, and dare I say, you're making them savvy users of data and analytics. So it starts with their awareness, understanding, training, and ultimately improving their own capability.
That is so true, Mark. I mean, we are firm believers of embedding analytics into the work processes. I mean, this notion of analytics as a side element of your core solution, it's something that we don't believe work as well as when you are integrating your data and analytics and make them embedded into the execution of the processes as they happen. So bringing that integration together, we believe it's critical, and we do it on the technical side and on the people and processes side as well.
I dare say it sounds like you're becoming a data and software company that's disguised as a CPG manufacturer.
Well, look, I mean, certainly technology is core to all of CPGs, right? But we are a food company. That's our purpose here. So it's really about leveraging data and analytics so that we can continue to create great food that you and all of our consumers enjoy.
That's great. 30 minutes goes quickly, and we have one last question. And I always end with this. What's in your toolkit? What's the one technique or process or thing you pull out again and again, but always seems to work? But what's a takeaway that you, Francisco Fraga, have in your arsenal that continues to pay dividends and benefits as a digital leader that our listeners could learn from today?
Yeah, look, I mean, top of my mind, at the core, I'm a problem solver, right? I mean, that's what I enjoy to do. And whether it is the digitization of Campbell or anything, being able to understand the situation, gather the relevant data, and come up with solutions to address the problem or take advantage of the opportunity on a timely basis. It's one thing that I've always held close to my heart, and I think it's core to the role that we play as technology leaders, is making sure that we take advantage of information and technology to solve our business problems or tackle or take advantage of those opportunities. And that's really something that I exercise, that I leverage, that I focus time with my team in developing. And it starts, fun enough, by really understanding the problem. You know, in these days, we talk about the speed a lot during this call. It's very common to try to jump into solutioning as quickly as possible. And one of my mantras is making sure that before we do that, we really understand what is the problem that we are solving. And if we are able to articulate what is that in very clear and actionable ways, the effort that we put and the time that we put in that problem definition will dramatically accelerate the solutioning after the fact. So that's my one piece of advice, I guess, Mark.
That's great. I'm paraphrasing, but I believe it was Albert Einstein that said if he had an hour to work on a problem, 50 minutes would be devoted to defining the problem, and 10 minutes would be devoted to problem solving. So it sounds like you have a very, very similar philosophy. Francisco, that was wonderful. A half an hour goes very, very quickly, but I want to thank you from CIONet very generously for your time today. And just a reminder to all of our listeners, same time next week, noon Eastern Standard Time, 5 p.m. GMT, 6 p.m. CET, same time next week. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.